everybody. We're super excited that you joined us today. We are going to be doing these interview series every Thursday at 1 p.m. And we have some really exciting guests with us. So we hope you'll join us over the next couple of weeks as well, too. We had great feedback from our first session last Thursday. Just want to go over a couple of things before we get started. Everyone is muted for safety reasons. And if you have questions, we definitely want to hear your questions. So to ask questions, use the chat feature that is located. If you're on your cell phone, you click more and you'll be able to see the chat feature. But yeah, just feel free to send us your questions. After we do the interview with Spencer today, we'll ask him some of your questions and get those answered for you. So without further ado, Spencer, let me get you unmuted. Hang on a second. Hey, Spencer, we're super excited to have you. If you will just take a few minutes and introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. This is actually my first real formal interview, I guess. So this is pretty exciting times for me. I hope everyone is staying safe, and I'm so happy to do this. And we're all adjusting here, and especially in our world, in the music industry, we're definitely adjusting. It's uncharted waters for everyone. So, but yeah, thank you for having me, and really excited to do this. I guess, yeah, like I said, my name is Spencer Foote. I am a music booking agent at William Morris Endeavor in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm originally from Nashville, actually, which is pretty rare these days in Nashville because just it's such a fun city and everyone's, starting to move here and all that stuff. So the music scene has really blossomed it's always been Music City, but now it's not necessarily just country music now. And so it's really exciting times for all of us. But yeah, I'm a Nashville native, and then I went to college at Sewanee, the University of the South in Tennessee, and I went there, and it's about an hour and a half outside of Nashville on the way towards Chattanooga and Atlanta. And I was an English major there. There wasn't really a music business program there. It's a small liberal arts college. And so I was an English major there, and right after college, I was able to get an interview and got the job at WME and moved right back to Nashville. So that was fun. And then so graduated in May and started at William Morris in the mailroom in June. And so I wish, beggars can't be choosers, obviously, but I wish I had traveled a little bit after college maybe. But moved right back to Nashville. So I've been in the state of Tennessee essentially my entire life, but yeah, couldn't be happier. So especially during this time when my mom lives about 5 minutes away from me, and so yeah, we get to have some family dinners, but staying apart, staying safe, of course. But yeah, that's kind of just where I've come from, a Nashville native, and moved back, and the music scene's it's still we're adjusting, of course, but we're doing the best we can right now.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day activities look like with WME.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess the story, I guess I should preface it by saying it's been pretty much turned on its head now, working from home, of course. But yeah, so I guess my story at WME, I've been there, it'll be 7 years in June. And what happens is when you start, unless it's a different circumstance, you start in what's called the mailroom, and so that's where you're making your copies, you're sending out the mail, you're running errands and doing all that stuff. But at the same time, you're learning, you're getting to know everyone, and just kind of getting trained up, because when you join a place like WME, they want you there for the long haul. And so I was lucky enough to get an interview there, got the job, obviously, and started in the mailroom. And then what happens there after you graduate from the mailroom, depending on how the office is moving, if people leave, if all that stuff. And so you get then bumped up to what's called a floater. And that's when you get all your paperwork training on, how to enter an offer that you receive. And then so you go from there, you bide your time, and then eventually you start applying to be an assistant on an agent's desk. And so from there, I was eventually, became an assistant, and you bounce around from different desks as an assistant to get, a different perspective, whether it be booking clubs and colleges in the Southeast like I did, or, moving on and moving up to arenas, amphitheaters, theaters, in the Northwest. And so eventually I was an assistant for about 4 years, I want to say. And eventually I became an assistant in the fairs and festivals department. And I was there for about a year or so until I got promoted into the fairs and festivals department, which was really lucky for me, I should say, because a lot of times when you get promoted, they say, okay, you've been doing this for the past year, but now we're going to have you book clubs in the Northeast. Go. And so for me, it was kind of an easier transition because I, didn't have to, switch departments or anything like that. So I, hit the ground running with fairs and festivals, and I was used to it. So definitely was fortunate, not to say that it's unfortunate if that doesn't happen to you, but I was especially lucky to, go right into the department that I was most recently familiar with. And so I've been doing that for about a year. And so this 2020 was my first full year of booking my own shows. And then all of a sudden this happens. And so it's been pretty interesting, but yeah, it's been great. So I guess in terms of your question for a day-to-day aspect, no day is really the same, honestly. You're obviously, the goal is to, get as many offers from buyers and promoters to present to our clients. And so we have, clients ranging from, Eric Church, Chris Stapleton, Luke Bryan, Brad Paisley, all the way down to, your baby acts that are, your up and coming acts, the hopefully, in our perspective, the next Luke Bryans, the next Eric Churches, et cetera. And so, so right now I'm a booking agent, which means I'm booking all the clients that WME already represents, while simultaneously I'm going at shows all the time, scouting new talent. And if I fall in love with someone, I then, present to, my superiors at WME and say, I'm really passionate about this guy, this girl, this band. And so then if in a perfect world, you then sign a client and then you're what's called a responsible agent. So in that sense, a booking agent would then present an offer to me, and I would then go over with, the managers, the labels, all that stuff to see if we want to confirm or pass on a date. But right now, so I'm just a booking agent. So if I were to, for example, I could get an offer for Eric Church, and then I would present that to Eric's responsible agent, and I do all the vetting, talk about ticket prices, comps, hotels, ground transportation, catering, all that stuff. I go through those discussions with the buyer and the promoter, and I negotiate on behalf of Eric and WME, of course. And then when the deal is ready and we've loaded it into our system, I then present it to Eric Church's responsible agent, and then they, go over it with their routing, and if it makes sense for them, or if they're going to be playing the market later on, they might want to pass on it and come back later to that market. It's a lot of different things that go into it. So I guess that's the paperwork standpoint. They decide if they want to confirm or pass on the date. So times that by about 1,000, and then you got pretty much what our day-to-day is. And so we're the grand one-sentence scheme of it is we route tours, and we book all the live shows for those clients. And then so obviously we're working with, Live Nation, AEG, the big promoters for those like bigger clients. But then for me, being in the fairs and festivals, it's a little bit different because my specific role is, working a lot with those first and second year fairs and festivals that, have the bright idea that say we want to put on a city event. And a lot of times it's a lot of events, they're not really sure what they're doing. And so it's my job to not only, vet those and ask the right questions for those promoters and fairs, but back when they year one, and then want to come back for year 2 and 3. And my goal obviously is to book those for consecutive years, develop that relationship, and help the city event grow or that festival grow. So I work with a lot of first year events, and so I have to do a lot of vetting and making sure I'm asking the right questions, whether it be about security or the production aspect of the stage. Is the stage going to be suitable for certain artists? So a lot of different questions go into it, and then once we get through that, we just start negotiating, the artist price, what they need, what, type of hotels or how many hotels they might need, if the routing works for them, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot that goes into it. But yeah, I guess you could say that's the day to day. A lot of it is, just firing emails back and forth, getting on the phone with a lot of these buyers and promoters, and helping come to a mutual agreement about a certain date.
That's awesome. It sounds like you do something different every single day, and it sounds like a ton of logistics that goes into it.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's every single one is different, and some might be a 4th of July event, so that you have those aspects, and then some might be indoors in November. So there's going to be different things that happen with each one. But luckily at WME, they train you throughout your time and as an assistant to have those questions and be prepared for those types of questions. You talk about all the expenses that the promoter has to go through, obviously, as well. So, whether it be, stagehands to help break down, or, runners to go if the artist for some reason needs, a certain type of guacamole or something, they go out and go get those. So it's going over all those, and everything's different. And so a lot of times with the fairs and festivals, it's a little bit more scaled down to the point where it's, flat guarantee for the artist, as opposed to, we're going to give you X amount of dollar guarantee. And then depending on how ticket sales or how, drink sales go, you can get a back end, is what we call it. And so the artist has the potential to make a back end and make a little bit more money, depending on how the show goes. But with a lot of fairs and festivals, it's kind of a flat guarantee, because it's obviously what's called a soft ticket event. It's a general admission. You can have 10 to 15,000 people there, whereas in a small club, it's 500 to 1,000 cap. And so there's a lot of different deals. The club deals are going to be different than the fairs and festival deals. But yeah, it comes down to the training that you get as an assistant. And I did skip one part. At WME, once you become a seasoned assistant and have been there for a while, you apply for the agent trainee program. And once you apply for that, you interview, you talk about, they give you a scenario where they want to see if you're thinking like an agent, thinking outside of the box, how to, push your client forward and give him, her, or they the exposure they need to become successful. And so once you go through the trainee program for about 2 years, which is what I did on the side of being an assistant of the everyday life. And so this is in addition to that. So it obviously, tests your work ethic, of course. And so going through there, and then hopefully you then get promoted, which I was lucky enough to. And so it's been the only job I've had since graduating from college, and I don't have any plans to leave anytime soon. I love it.
So one of my questions for you is, with you having a degree in English, was this something that you had always thought about doing? Did your degree help you? Did you make a change of, I don't really know what I want to do? Or how did that come about? How did you end up applying for the job in the mailroom? And I guess to answer that question too, is we may have some students on here that just don't know where to start. They might be interested in the music industry, but they just don't know where to start.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, Sewanee doesn't have a music business program or anything like that. So and honestly, yeah, I had no clue what I wanted to do. And like when I was in college, I had a couple internships. Both of them were sports based. One of them was, TV broadcasting. And then the next summer I did a radio broadcasting, both sports oriented. And then after those 2 internships, I realized that I'm such a big fan of sports that I didn't really want it to be my job. I wanted to keep it as a hobby, or, I might end up resenting it, but that doesn't happen for everyone. Of course, some people, fall in love with sports and, then do it as their job. And so obviously more power to you. And so for me, music was a 1A for me. And I knew, obviously, being in Nashville, the music scene is obviously a huge industry there. And so I figured, I could go that route. But my story of how I even got the interview was really through college alumni. And so one Sewanee alumni is a guy named Jay Williams, who is the agent for, Eric Church, Luke Bryan, Chris Stapleton, Dierks Bentley, Brothers Osborne, and a lot more. So obviously he's done very well for himself. And but he came from Sewanee as well. Again, it's a liberal arts college. I think he was a forestry major. So Sewanee obviously is up in the mountains and big time hiking and biology, all that stuff. And he was a forestry major. And then eventually he got lucky enough to get a job in the mailroom as well, and he made his way all the way up to being the head of our office and obviously one of the biggest agents in Nashville. But yeah, so actually Sewanee is great because they have a great alumni program, and they actually did an alumni panel discussion for music and entertainment. And so we had about 20 people come to that, and I got in touch with Jay Williams. I was sat next to him at the lunch, and this is kind of a funny story. I'm distantly related to Dirks, and so he's not from Nashville, but he moved to Nashville when he was obviously pursuing his career. And so I knew him. He would come to Easter and Thanksgiving at my grandmother's house. He's from Phoenix, and so but he didn't have any family in Nashville. And so, I got to know him a little bit. But so flash forward 10 years later, when I'm sat at the lunch after the panel discussion, and I asked Jay, I go, so how often do you talk to Dirks? And he was like, well, every day. And so I was like, well, that's kind of crazy. He's actually my cousin. He was like, no way. And so we hit it off from there, and then, kept in touch. And it was kind of funny. He's so busy that I was being that eager college student, emailing once every couple days saying, hey, would love to grab coffee. Hey, would love to, stay in touch, blah, blah, blah. But he's just so busy that obviously he can't respond all the time. And so it was actually another alumni at Sewanee who's on the panel discussion as well. It doesn't have really anything to do with the music industry though, but he does, he had a connection to the HR representative at WME. And so he suggested I reach out to her. And again, I had no clue what I wanted to do. This was going to be my first application and interview. And so I emailed out of the blue just saying, hey, I would love to be considered for an interview. No response for a couple of weeks. But at the same time, that Sewanee alum was talking to the HR person about me, and she was asking questions. Is this guy worth bringing in for an interview? The Sewanee alum, he said absolutely. And so I was lucky enough because of that relationship that I had with the alum, he was able to help me out and get an interview. And then, the rest is history. It's been I've been super, super lucky. It has been the only interview I've ever had in my life. So until today. And but yeah, so that was kind of the start. And it was, I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's a lot easier, or I had an easier path than some, because, sometimes you'll apply for 10 jobs and then none of them come to fruition. But if you just stay at it and, keep in touch with those people, good things will happen. So that's kind of my whole spiel. Say it again. I'm sorry.
It sounds like you were super persistent, and that's one of the biggest things that we tell students all the time is relationships matter so much, and your ability
100%.
to network and meet people and
Right.
email and reach out and talk to them at luncheons. That's so important. So I'm glad
Absolutely.
you shared that story with us.
Yeah, and again, in the music industry as a whole, it's all about networking and relationships too. Because, like I said, when you're scouting talent, an agency isn't the only team member for. I'll keep using the Eric Church reference, but like Eric Church, he doesn't have just an agent. He has an agent, a manager, he has a label, he has an attorney, he has a lawyer, he has a publisher. All those different things come into it. And so when I'm scouting a potential client, I want to be able to reach out to those people in the industry that I've networked with, who might work at a label, saying, hey, I've got this great new artist that I'm really, really passionate about. Would you want to check him or her out? And then, maybe they fall in love too. And then so the label then talks to radio stations. Manager is obviously the all-encompassing, manager. And so publishers, then you hire a lawyer. And so it's because of those relationships that you have that they put the trust back in you to be that client's agent. And so it really is all about networking and relationships and staying persistent, following up, writing thank you letters, handwritten thank you letters goes miles and miles and miles, especially in this day and age when everyone's, emailing, texting, all that stuff, Zooming, I mean, in this day and age. But yeah, handwritten letters, I just from my experience go a long, long way. And yeah, just staying persistent and keeping those relationships.
So one of my favorite questions to ask adults is, once you graduated high school, got out into the real world, what would be examples of some of the careers that you've discovered as an adult that you had no clue even existed when you were in high school?
That's a great question. And I mean, it happens. I mean, new jobs pop up everywhere all the time that you wouldn't even imagine. So, like, for example, with coronavirus and everyone staying at home, these live stream shows are popping up left and right. And it's just people being innovative and sometimes creating something themselves. And then, it blows up. And so, yeah, a lot of jobs that I just didn't even think were super necessary, or like necessarily, a big job that I would go for. And then, you realize, wow, they're actually very, very important. So for example, like a production manager with an artist, he or she is the one that's calling the promoter, about a week or two before the show, going over everything in what's called an artist rider, which is like, their ideal scenario of what they need, whether it be production, hospitality, all that stuff. And so I had no clue that it's a very important job, a production manager. But then, a production manager is also the head or the boss of like an entire production team. And so that could be anywhere, depending on how big the artist is, between 5 and 50 people. So that's 50 jobs right there. So there are jobs out there, and it's just finding that niche, and again, talking to the right people, getting in touch with what you're passionate about and showing your worth. And then the jobs will all of a sudden, just pop up, and things that you would have never thought existed would be like one sole job. You would think, an agent might do all the publishing and the marketing for an artist, but no, there's actually a publisher and like a marketing team for the artist specifically. So there's all kinds of jobs out there that I did not know even were existing or necessarily important, but they absolutely are. So, that's beyond just the music industry as well. I mean, you could imagine any type of field and industry, and you can probably find a job that you didn't think was an actual job, and it's a well-paying job too. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. We love exposing students to new career paths and just opening up their eyes to all the opportunities. So certainly appreciate that. We have some really good questions rolling in, so I want to get to a few of those. The first one says, in your career, so just based on what you do, your everyday life, who do you think is going to be the next big breakout artist?
Shameless plug. I am working with one guy named Caden Cox, and I need everyone to go check him out. He just released another single last week. It's called Hung Over You. He's going to be the next star. No, I'm totally kidding. I mean, I certainly hope he will be, but yeah, he's kind of my first client that I've signed. And so obviously it's very early for him, but I mean, there's certain acts that, just overnight, just skyrocket. And so, I mean, in the country world, you can think of acts like Morgan Wallen or a Jordan Davis or, Brothers Osborne. Like they're obviously, becoming household names. Brothers Osborne did that. A lot of times it just takes, one song or one tour where, you get lucky enough to be added to a big tour where you're, the first of 3 acts, and, you're playing to an arena that's 15% full, but then at the same time 15% of that arena that's full is talking about you the next day and saying, wow, they were fantastic. And then obviously on paper the ideal scenario is to eventually be headlining those arenas. One that we're really excited about right now is a girl named Gabby Barrett, who has a single right now that should be a #1 next week. And so we're really excited about her. And so she's going to, she's going to be ascending for sure. And so that's one to keep an eye out. But I mean, there's tons of them out there. I mean, we have one guy named Rain Johnson who isn't a household name right now, but he has a single at radio that's doing really, really well. And so it's interesting because country still does rely on radio a lot. And so not necessarily as much as the contemporary or the hip hop or, anything like that, but country still does rely on radio. And not to say that those other genres don't, but in the other genres, it's a lot of the streaming and the Spotify's, Pandora's. But yeah, being able to say you have a number one hit at country radio makes a big difference. And, then all of a sudden your price goes up a little bit, and then you're playing to bigger rooms, and then you're getting a better slot at festivals as opposed to, that 1 p.m. slot when people are still walking in the door. You're then at that 6 p.m. slot where, the crowd's all there, obviously for the headliner at the end of the night. But, then that if you hit that 6 o'clock slot, you're playing in front of, 20, 30,000 people sometimes, depending on the festival. And so, yeah, I guess those are a few acts to name, but yeah, keep an eye out for Kanan Cox. We're super
we'll have to
excited
write that one down.
Please do. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, April, I'm working with you on one date that, did have to move because of COVID-19. And so we've got 3 that were on that bill that we're extremely excited about: Sean Stimley, Trey Landon, and Rachel Wammick. They are all fantastic. And those are the type of acts that, we try to build. We have a development program too that I'm a part of. Some of the younger agents are in that development program. And so that's when we're always trying to get, as many support slots as we can, just to give them as much exposure as possible. And so, yeah, Gabby was in that. Morgan Wallen was in that. Brothers Osborne was in that. So they all, make their way up and eventually are going to be, headlining those arenas. Kane Brown was in that too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's super interesting how you truly, it sounds like you grow artists through the program. So I love that.
And that's, one of the biggest passions I have about the job, really. It's, it sounds cliche to say, but when you're at a show and, all the lights go out and you hear 10,000 people screaming, my obvious goal is to be a part of the team that helped make that happen. When, like 5 years beforehand, they were playing at a 500 capacity club and now they're selling out arenas. And so that's one of the main passions about it and what I'm most excited about with our job. It's great.
That's so awesome. So you mentioned earlier about how every artist has a writer. One of the questions that I see is, I always hear about artists requesting crazy things. What is the weirdest or craziest thing that you've ever seen an artist request for backstage?
Huh. Wow. Well, I will say the country acts are a little bit easier. I will say that, with certain country acts, I just say, give me a bottle of whiskey and I'll be good to go or something. I don't know. But then I guess, a lot of the big acts, I reference like a certain type of guacamole or something, or, a certain gluten-free type bread that they might need. I honestly haven't seen anything that I'm just like, okay, that's ridiculous. But then a lot of times it's kind of funny because you'll send the writer to them and to the buyer, and then the buyer, when they sign the contract and send it back, you'll get the writer back and it's just all marked up saying, we are not going to do this. We're not going to provide that. Absolutely not. But I mean, it's like a very specific type of, deli meat or something, or, a certain type of water, like no Dasani, but only Aquafina or something along those lines. Like I've seen a few things like that, but I mean, at the same time, when you're having artists as big as some of the ones that we represent, they do have a little bit of leverage in that regard. So it's, they could, if obviously we don't promote this by any means, but if they wanted to, they could throw a fit and not want to go on stage. And obviously we try to avoid that at all costs. But I mean, at the same time, they do have a little bit of leverage. And so they say, if you want me to play for 10,000 people, like, we're going to have some requirements that you guys need to fulfill. And so that goes back to kind of the everyday aspect of it, of what I'm negotiating on the front end, saying they have these specific requirements, whether it be, the production, the hospitality, the ground transportation, security escorts, if the artist gets big enough, things like that. And so, yeah, there's some interesting things that we find on those riders, but again, at the end of the day, artists are flexible. They just want to play for their fans, and so we'll go back and forth and find a mutually agreeable scenario.
So it looks like we have time for one more question, and this is a really good one. Are there any opportunities at WME for young people, maybe fresh out of high school, or maybe even they're still in high school? Are there any type of internships or even just ways to come and see what's up?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have interns. They're normally in college, and they're applying for credits, of course, and all that stuff. I would say, but yeah, we have interns probably I guess twice a semester. We have a group of interns, and they're there for, and a lot of them are Belmont students or Vanderbilt students, just because they're in Nashville and they don't want to have to travel a whole bunch. But besides internships, we've I mean, sometimes if for example, like there's an agent whose son or daughter is at a certain high school that has a music class, like something like you guys do, we'll be happy to offer a tour of some of our office or something along those lines. In terms of actual like a 9-to-5 job, they probably have some requirements of being in college, and then you go through an interview process and an application process as if it's a real job. And so and that's what I did for my 2 internships. And it all started with a blind email just saying, I would love to come have coffee with you and talk about the everyday life of what you do, and showing the interest and the passion, and then showing the follow-up, and again writing those thank you letters. It goes a long way. And so again, the persistence is key, and just showing that you're different from everyone else, because I mean, it's competitive, of course. And so when they're going through all their applications, there's 50 people that have applied for maybe 2 positions. And so you definitely want to stick out from the rest. And that's one thing that I really enjoyed about my college, Sewanee, was they really prepare you for that. They have this program called Beyond the Gates, which is obviously a metaphor for when you leave college, and they have alumni come back. You do mock interviews. You go over your resumes and help build them up. And so one thing that was really interesting that I had never thought of was my guidance counselor, or my alumni counselor. She said, why don't you change the weight of your resume when you turn it in? Why don't you get like some thicker paper when you turn it in? And I had never thought of that before, but then when you think about it, those 50 other people are just handing you, printing off just a regular sheet of paper, just handing it in, where mine had a little bit more weight to it, or wasn't just that basic white color. It was maybe an off-white or something, or had like a raised font, just little things to stick out, to show your worth and show that you're different and you deserve it more than someone else. Because yeah, I mean, it is super competitive, and but if you have those relationships and you're driven enough, good things will happen.
That is such good advice. And Spencer, we thank you so much for your time today. I think you've given some really good insight into what you do and what happens at WME. But for everybody out there, if you want to get notifications about our weekly series, you can drop your email address or cell phone number in the chat and we'll notify you. Thank you, Spencer. And I'm sure I will be talking to you soon.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Let's hope that by December, our data is still good. And so, I mean, that's kind of our everyday life right now. We're all working from home, and a lot of my days are I have events in May, June, and July that are wanting to go over different scenarios, whether it be rescheduling to later in 2020 or canceling 2020, and in our best case scenario is rebooking the artist for 2021. So again, times that by 1,000, and it's been interesting. We're definitely still working hard, and but most important thing is staying safe, because the large public gatherings, it's no joke. And so I hope everyone is staying safe out there. And again, I'm happy to do it anytime. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. And if anyone's in Nashville, feel free to give me a shout. I'd be happy to help in any way I can. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Well, you have a good afternoon.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. Stay safe out there.